So you need 5 things for evolution by natural selection, and I call these observations. But it's just 5 facts about the world that all come together in a way that I think will become hopefully pretty obvious as we go through. So number one, there's variation in a population of any species, and we talked about this with race and humans. Humans do vary. They don't vary in nice little neat boxes, but we're not all the same. We have different features, and that's true of every species. Some species like cheetahs, they're we killed off most of the cheetahs, so the ones we have left are not a lot of variation left in that population, but there is still some. Um, and there, and you can see this here that these lizards are all little slight differences in striping patterns, and then maybe the shape of their head and stuff like that. In fact, this is very much against the idea of, I told you about, I think, archetypes. Archetypes that's a Greek concept, but we just call it type specimen in biology, and then naturalists came up with this. The type specimen is like the perfect example of this species. It is the essential perfect version. Like, let's say we'll just pick this guy, because why not? Here's the thing. The type specimen is usually the first one that you find. You land in South America. No, colonist has been there yet to officially collect data for science. And this colonist happens to pick up this lizard. It's the first one, sticks it in a jar. It's the type specimen. Seriously, that's what happened. It's ridiculous. Because, in fact, we know that there is no perfect type of any species. There's variation, and you can't pick the one that is the quintessential lizard. Like, who's the type specimen of humans? That's like one of the few species for which there is actually no type specimen. These still exist in museums. London's one of the biggest natural history museum. It has the most specimens, not surprisingly, because they were the, British Empire. And they would collect stuff from all over the world and bring it back to London and stick it in shelves. Anyway, so not all these lizards look the same, different striping patterns. Where does all new variation come from? Because, you have this population of lizards that's around for 20 generations, and all of a sudden some new pattern, like, oh wait, that one's even more unique. I forgot about that one. You get some sort of unique thing over here, and you see how there's, look, it's like two-toned. Oh, there's two-toned over here too. Well, let's just pretend this one doesn't. Well, they're all kind of, whatever. This one's lighter. Let's just say something new pops up in this population. The source of that, mutation. What is a mutation? We did learn about this in information. So you remember you have DNA and you have A, T, C, G, and then maybe a couple T's and a G and an A again, and C, whatever. You have this sequence. A mutation can occur at a level of just, one letter change, say. And that changes maybe the whole protein, and then you get something new. It could be a chromosomal mutation, like here's a little chromosome, and maybe some part of it breaks off and floats away and goes and attaches itself to a different chromosome. That has happened before. In fact, humans have 46 chromosomes and chimps 48 because our common ancestor had 48. And sometime during human evolution, 2 chromosomes that were, 2 little ones, they got stuck together and became one. Kind of interesting. So mutation is going to be the source of all new variation, and you need variation. That is key to evolution. Remember that. You must have variation. Okay, next. Second thing, inheritance. This seems so obvious to us now because we see it, In Darwin's time, he didn't know how it happened, but he could tell that parents, and their kids looked alike. His own kids looked like him and his wife. And then, breeding pigeons, he would notice, look, the white pigeon gives birth to mostly white pigeon babies. So he knew that inheritance was happening and that traits could be passed on. But he didn't know this. Like, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but maybe if I drew it like this, you remember in evolution we talked about, if you've got, this is a carrier. So carrier, hopefully you're thinking, it's got one of the bad alleles for, this is an R. Say this little r is for, I don't know, we'll just say it is cystic fibrosis, but also has a dominant R that's a normal condition, and this is cystic fibrosis. So mom could be here, and then dad is the same. So dad can be over here. They're both what we call heterozygotes, 2 different alleles. And then, remember we figured out their kids. You go like, okay, these are 2 big R's, and this is big R, little r. This is a big R and a little r, and those are 2 little r's. So that's exactly what is down here, right? And then, oh, this is affected cystic fibrosis, and then no carrier at all. So this pattern, Darwin didn't have a clue. Really, he just thought, actually, a couple of important points that he thought is that's different from what we think of today. He thought that mom and dad would pass down 100% of their traits to the kid. We now know that that is not true. Oops. We know that, in fact, each parent passes along only half. So mom's going to pass along only this half to, well, not all the kids, but only this half or only this half. So that wasn't until later when I talked about Gregor and the pea plants, and he was a monk, and he was, like Darwin didn't really like people and hung out with pea plants, whereas Darwin was hanging out with pigeons. But anyway, you have to have inheritance of the variation. The variation, like the striping pattern, has to be heritable. You can pass it on through DNA to your offspring. Okay, next thing, number 3, competition. You have to have competition in the population for some sort of limited resource. Oops, Darwin called this, he referred to it, this is Darwin's term, the struggle, oops, it's a struggle right now. Okay, wait, oh, there's my pen. Struggle for existence. You could just think of it as competition. He was, had some sort of eloquent notions about words. And by limited resource, what do we mean? Well, what do you need? Food. So there's only so much food in the environment. What else do you need? You might need protection if you are somebody who gets eaten. These guys maybe not so much, but they're definitely competing for this. Hyenas and lions eat the same thing. By the way, it is a myth that this lion here is the mighty hunter, and that the hyena then steals the kill. No, that's not actually true. What often happens, and I talked to, anyway, I won't go off too far. What often happens is that, in fact, the hyena does the kill at night, but not many people are out there looking at night because it's hard to find the hyena and to film it. Anyway, hyenas would make the kill at night. Awesome. And in the early morning, the lions would wake up, yawn, stretch, and go steal it because the lions are, in fact, bigger. And the hyenas are like, dang, they gotta leave their kill behind. And then the humans roll up in their Land Rover with their cameras and they go, look at the lions. They killed it, and the hyena are circling, trying to steal it, when in fact the hyena were circling, trying to get their food back that was originally theirs to begin with. Okay, so, I erased the whole thing. Anyway, we said food, maybe protection. Another major important thing, mates. You are competing, well, maybe not you personally, but species are competing to reproduce. So in some species, you can see this really obviously, like the peacock, you've got this little bird that's a tasty little treat, and it's got this, oh wait, you know what? I should make it blue, right? It's got this elaborate display of feathers. The males do, I should point out. Males are peacocks. And that's going to get him killed because he's just going to be waving a flag saying, eat me. But it's worth it. It's worth the trade-off because he attracts mates. He is not going to reproduce unless he has some sort of display that the females who get to choose will say, that's a good one. The females, by the way, are called pea hens, not peacocks, and they don't have that display. Okay, so you're competing for limited resources. And also, what is basically true in all populations is that populations will just grow indefinitely. If you can think about, you start out with 2, and then those two mate, and then they have, say, 4, and then 8, and then so on. And I don't know what those lines mean, but so on. It's just going to get, you can grow exponentially, they call it. Just square everything and keep going forever. And there's going to be a lot of individuals of that species. But of course, we know that this eventually gets checked. So actually, this is what this graph is supposed to show, is this is just constant population growth with nothing stopping it. There's nothing limiting it. And a lot of populations will grow like this for a while. It's kind of what's going on here. And then it's going to reach this plateau where it's like, this is the limit. The resources will only allow whatever 6 is. You're done. So competition is what's going to keep this plateau. So if you lost competition for some reason, maybe you could keep going up to a higher level. If, say, all the lions died, the hyena could get up here, perhaps, because there's no more lions competing. Now, this is an example of competition between two different species, but the same thing's going to happen, say, within hyenas. If you got a hyena that doesn't, get along with the pack, then they're losing out on the competition probably. And then, of course, the peacock example I gave, that was within peacocks. The males are competing against each other. So both forms of competition matter. Like within species, between species, it all matters. Okay. That doesn't make that look pretty. Okay. Fourth thing. Number 4, environment. This is actually really critical. Well, they're all critical, but what works well in one environment doesn't necessarily work in another. And there's a huge diversity of environments across the planet. We've got like deserts, down in southern Utah. Technically, we're not in a desert here in the valley, but it's still dryish. And then you got super wet areas. So what's going to be adaptive here is dealing with very little water, right? In this environment, that doesn't matter. There's water everywhere. It's a rainforest. There's different things that you're competing for. In this case, like these plants here, they're competing for sunlight. It just gets really choked out there. And the bottom here, it's really shady. So they're competing because there is, say, less sunlight. And there's tons of sunlight over here. That's not an issue in the desert. And here, it's just cold. And it was hot over here. So that's two different things you got to adapt to. Context matters. So they have different characteristics that species do that would be living here versus here. Because there is no such thing as a trait, a feature, some physical or some protein, whatever, that's adaptive everywhere. When I ask students for this, one of the things that they often give me, which is reasonable, is the one thing that would be adaptive everywhere and in every environment would be intelligence. And, getting a big brain like humans, because we can live anywhere in any context, and yet we're killing ourselves, so maybe we're not so smart. Or maybe intelligence isn't that adaptive. Maybe. So the other counter I'm going to give to that is intelligence requires, as far as we know, it always is going to require a bigger brain. Bigger brains are really, really costly. They take so much energy. And if I was doing the energy bio concept, I might talk about it now, but brains just suck energy. So if you don't have enough energy, this species, you're not going to be able to evolve intelligence. In fact, if you have a big brain baby, that baby's going to probably die because it's not going to get enough energy in its environment. That is not successful evolution if you die. That's the opposite of successful evolution. And that kind of gets us to number 5. Our 5th observation, survival and reproduction are not random. So we have to do some terms first over here. Fitness. Fitness is the number of offspring you have. This is the gold standard for being successful evolutionarily. And fitness does not mean like, have you gone to the gym and worked out? It's not like that at all. It's simply, how many babies have you had? If you've had a lot of babies, then you are fit. If you haven't had very many, your fitness is low. That's how we measure it in biology. In evolutionary biology, is fitness is how many babies you had. And this is true in all the humans we know, and it's true in other species as well. Some individuals have more babies than others. Like this individual had this many babies, and this individual only had 2. So which one is more evolutionarily successful? The blue one, the one with the blue trait. Is blue adaptive? Apparently, because blue has more babies. That's kind of really how we measure how something's adaptive. So if I go over here to this thing, this actually shows you a lot of the observations that I talked about previously. So you start out with, there's only one type. This type has babies, and then in the next generation, a couple of variants show up that are new. So you get new variation. You need new variation. Otherwise, how can you select things? Remember, this is natural selection. You can't select if everyone's the same. It doesn't matter. But you could select from these 3 now. Okay. Selected against. That really just means reject, right? So who gets rejected for whatever reason? This color doesn't work well in this again, it's going to be environment. That's the one thing that they left. Well, maybe there's another one. Thing they left out of here is that when something is unfavorable, it all depends on environment. It could be favorable in one place and not another. So say these things, whatever they are eaten by other animals, and then they happen to reside in a dark environment, so they're camouflaged. This one's camouflaged, and it doesn't get eaten as often as this one. This one got all eaten up. But what if we change the environment, and instead of a dark environment, it was a light environment? This one hides easier, then this whole story would be different. Okay, so we've got, this is observation number 4. Oh, this was observation number 1. You know what? Number 2 is there as well. Look at that. These color, oh wait, we really see it here. So if this is your mom, then you're more likely to be that color, and so on. See how, this individual has darker babies and this one has lighter babies. So that's actually number 2. There is, you know what? I don't know if that's the best example because, parents don't always look like kids. There can be mutations. But I actually think the better example is, see how this one has babies that are closer to its own color than to this one? So that is number 2. 3. Do we have competition? Yeah, implicitly we do because, let's see, because it doesn't really matter which color I use. Competition, so these, well, let's go down to this level because it's a mess up there. These 2 individuals were outcompeted for whatever reason. They lost the competition. And the competition sometimes is for something obvious like mates. Like, oh, well, maybe these guys just, they show them as X's here like they didn't survive. But the other thing could be you just didn't have babies. That means evolutionarily you're a dead end. But it also could be death. So it could be they were eaten. So I should say no mates. So that's sad. And then there, that's the saddest sad face ever. And then maybe they were eaten. So, they didn't survive. That's also not competing very well. Maybe they starved because they never found enough food. Who knows? For whatever reason, in this environment, these guys didn't work out. They either didn't survive or didn't reproduce. Well, you wouldn't reproduce if you don't survive. But yeah, you didn't survive and reproduce in that environment. So sometimes when I have students try and think of, what's the competitive, factor here that matters? Sometimes it's just simply not dying. In the competition for not dying or competition for survival, some individuals like these guys win out in certain environments. And then this is kind of number 5, who has the most babies. So 5th, I would just really think of, survival and reproduction, but in particular, fitness. How many babies did you have? And if you don't survive, you won't have babies. So these 2 are linked, but bottom line, how many babies did you have? That's number 5. Okay, so that is evolution by natural selection. And, oh, yeah, it looks so cute.